Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 199th episode of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Theresa Carpenter. And today you are seeing for the first time my first in-person guest. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. I'm excited to be here and be the first guest here. I'm excited to have a cool conversation. It's a really cool way to get to know each other. You're actually, I don't know if you've told your listeners, but about our relationship and that you're going to be getting out of the Navy soon and coming to work with me for my Skillbridge opportunity at Canine Coaching with Chris. So I think this is really cool. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I thought that there was no better way to bring you guys along for the journey. Thanks to my chain of command, who kindly gave me the opportunity to take 90 days and do a Skillbridge opportunity. It's something I highly recommend for those of you who are transitioning, but that is the opportunity that I was given. So thankfully, Chris was on the Skillbridge portal and we had the opportunity to get together. So today I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Chris. We're going to learn more about his story. And we're also going to learn about dog training, which I think is something that is often misunderstood. And often there is a lot of misconceptions about the proper way to dog train. So as I said, I'm sitting down today with Chris Lamy. He's a veteran, father, advocate, and dog trainer whose story is one of purpose, perseverance, and profound transformation. The oldest of 7 children, Chris took pride in being a leader from an early age, a trait that made him a natural with family dogs. That early connection with animals would come full circle in ways he never imagined. Chris joined the U.S. Air Force in 2006, serving 10 years as a security forces member and military working dog handler. He deployed 5 times, including 4 to active war zones. In 2012, he and his working dog Kitti, J296, were attached to Navy SEAL Team 2 in Afghanistan, an experience that changed his life forever. After leaving the military in 2016, he chased a new goal, which I found fascinating. I can't wait to get into this. Earning a law degree from Louisiana State University, which he completed in 2020. But life had other plans. In a turn of fate, he stepped in to help run a dog training business after a mentor's sudden passing and rediscovered his calling. And now back in the hometown of Long Beach, Mississippi, right here near me, he runs Canine Coaching with Chris, where he helps dogs and owners build better lives together. And he's also a leader at the Adoptable Dog, a nonprofit who's funding training for shelter pups, and co-hosts the podcast Whiskey and Wolves, continuing to serve his community in deeply meaningful ways. Welcome again, Chris.
Thank you very much. That's pretty cool to hear. Like having the opportunity to talk about what some of the things I've done and knowing that somebody actually cares to hear it is pretty cool. But then just like reading like awards that we've gotten, like sitting there and listening to some of my story is pretty cool. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. And I always think it's interesting because a lot of people, when I read their bio, it's almost like they don't internalize that it's about them. It's almost like, oh, that's about somebody else.
Right.
And I always find that so funny because I think over the course of our lives, we don't take stock in how far we've come. We're always focused on
what's next.
What's the next thing? What have I have not got yet? And
yes.
So I think that's amazing that I get the opportunity. And that's why I always read the full bio and do that, because I really want to give people that opportunity to tell that part of their story. So first off, I always ask, and I know you're from here, but you were born and raised here in Long Beach. But what inspired you, and like why did you join the United States Navy?
Air Force. So join the Air Force. That's okay. You got Navy on the brain. You're almost done. So I joined in okay. So I grew up in Long Beach, like you said. I had my first child when I was 19, 20. And when around the time she was 5 or 6 months old, maybe a little younger, Hurricane Katrina hit and just devastated the entire area. And around that time I was working as a waiter, and I just I had this realization, like, okay, I've got to do something if I want to give my daughter a life that I think that my daughter deserves. And so I knew that waiting tables was not going to get me to where I wanted. I wasn't in a position to go to school. So the Air Force seemed like a viable option. I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Yeah, why Air Force?
So interestingly enough, when I started thinking about the idea of joining the military, I started reaching out to people that were in the military that I knew that had been in, that were currently serving. Every one of them told me the same thing: join the Air Force. It's a better quality of life. It's not as active in most career fields are not as active in combat zones. It's a little safer, but mainly the quality of life, which after my 10 years is very true. I was in some rather gross areas.
Yeah.
I usually deployed with the Army or the Navy or the Marines,
You got to see all the branches.
Right. I got to work with all the branches and see all the branches. But here's the cool thing. I got an extra $225 a month every time I was with them for substandard living.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yes. And the Air Force gets substandard living every time that we live with or work with another branch, because the Air Force is known for having a higher quality of life.
Right, right.
But I joined in 2006. I went to Japan for my first base, and I got there in October and immediately deployed in, I think, January.
Okay.
So my wife at the time and daughter were in Japan, and I deployed to Camp Bucca, Iraq, in South Iraq. It was a largest detention facility I think in the world at the time.
Wow.
And we were there during the surge. So I ended up spending 10 months.
What were you doing there?
It was a detainment facility.
Right,
so like a prison. I was essentially a prison guard. Yeah, it was like a correctional officer, a prison guard. They were detainees. They weren't prisoners, but it was basically like a prison guard. It was not a fun trip. It was not an easy trip. But it was my first one. We were there during the surge. We were supposed to be there for 6 months. We ended up being there for 10. And really kind of got the shaft in a lot of ways. During that time, like I said, that was 2006. There was a lot going on
during like the heat of the conflict.
Right. There was some really bad stuff going on. And not all of them, but a lot of those individuals that they were capturing they were sending them to us. And it was a rough trip.
And that was post Abu Ghraib, because if I remember correctly, Abu Ghraib happened in 2003, 2004 timeframe.
Yes, and it was still rather fresh. That memory of what had happened was still rather fresh, and I'll say that, and maybe nobody would appreciate this, but I can see how mistakes like that happen. Right. I'm not condoning their actions by any means, but when you're in that situation, you almost have to dehumanize some of these things. And it's unfortunately easy to do. So again, not condoning the actions that were taken in Abu Ghraib at all, but I can understand it. I can understand allowing yourself to get into a position that you ordinarily should not mentally or emotionally be in.
I mean, isn't there that Stanford experiment where the people like are told to apply?
That's interesting. I just read something. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but I think most people know what I'm talking about. It's the experiment where I think behind the curtain, they were being guided to apply a certain amount of punishment towards a non-compliant subject. And they found like the majority of the people just did it because an authority figure.
It's the lab coat mentality.
Yes.
If someone comes in and tells you a position of authority tells you to do something, we as humans are so willing to go ahead with it if it's coming from a position of power.
Right.
And I find those studies very fascinating, and applying them to some of the situations I've been in, not just personally, but as a military member, really made me see my service in a different light.
Yeah. So what were you saying that you were just reading something recently about it? You said,
actually what you said, that originally the study showed that they were just not really given any direction, but recently has come out that no, there was some direction given, and there was some of those, the people putting on the study were actually saying, no, you need to do this. You need to put on some pressure. And that was unknown until I think this year. Right.
I mean, I don't know when it was unknown. I just know when I went through my graduate program, there were so many protocols about surveys and about studies and other things. And I was told that it was because of abuses that had happened in the past on college students where they were subjected to these kinds of studies, which unfortunately have lifelong effects. So definitely that was a tough time to be in the military and to be in a combat zone. And so where did you go from there after Iraq?
So after Iraq, we spent 10 months. I went back to Japan, and I had a pretty quick turnaround. They actually, when I got back, they offered me a trip, I think like 6 months later, to the Caribbean. So I went to the Caribbean for 6 months, and that one I could have turned down. I volunteered for that. It was good money, and it was a nice location. So I went and spent 6 months in the Caribbean, and then went and finished my time in Japan. So I spent 3 years in Japan, and then moved to New Mexico, Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. While I was there, I deployed one time to Iraq. And that was, I don't want to say an easier deployment, but it wasn't too terrible, especially for how it could have been, for where I could have been. And that's also the time when I got back From that deployment, that was 2010, and I swapped over to canine. They were building up the canine program because they realized what an asset canines were on the battlefield. So there was an opportunity for me to go from security forces to the canine world, and so I did. And so I did that in 2011, and PCS, or changed stations, duty stations, to Moody Air Force Base in Georgia.
Gotcha. Did you know that you wanted to have a career in dogs? Because it sounded like, I believe I read in your bio that you had already had some kind of a background working with dogs, or just leading, just
Sure.
leadership, being the oldest child of 7.
Yeah. So my first dog, I've had quite a few family dogs that I've owned, but Sonny was really my first dog. I got him. He was a golden retriever when I was 16. And it just, one of those things, like, it just felt right. Like, I've always had such a connection with dogs. And so when that opportunity came up to go canine, it was a no-brainer for me. It was a very obvious choice, because I had already felt such a connection with my family dogs. And so yeah, it was a really easy choice. And it was one of those things that as soon as I got in, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is, yeah, I'm a fit.
Yeah.
And so I went through training and then went to Moody Air Force Base in Georgia and worked at the 820th Combat Operations Squadron, I think is what it's called, Base Defense Squadron, something. But anyway, what's unique about them is they don't have a stateside mission. Most security forces and most canine handlers in the Air Force have a police mission, and then they go and deploy. All we did was train and deploy. So we had a lot of opportunity to kind of push ourselves and push our dogs and do things that you really didn't have an opportunity to do if you were working on the road and working as a police officer for 12 hours a day. So we got to really experience dogs in a very cool way. We had about 22 handlers at where I was at, give or take. And in 2012 came down a jet tasking, which basically just means, hey, we need one person and one dog. And I was able to get selected for that. And I went from to Kandahar Air Force Base to FOB Lagman. And from FOB Lagman ended up getting linked up with, there was a Navy SEAL team on FOB Lagman, and they had just lost one of their dogs, had to get sent home for injury reasons. And so they asked me to come out, or asked for a good friend of mine, Jeremy Burkeen, was my kennel master. And so they reached out to him, and we got linked up, and we went out in the middle of nowhere and took over a home in a town called Zakoozy. And we established a village stability point. So we just had this house in the middle of nowhere, where American forces had never been before. And we had a 15-kilometer bubble that was ours. And so we would travel to each of the cities, and the intent was to win the hearts and minds. And so that was, without getting too deep into it, that was an experience. I got exactly what I wanted. One of my favorite memories from there. I remember walking through this field, and most of the fields it's all like kind of farmland. And so the fields kind of do that little dip, and you're walking, and it's the middle of the night, and I've got my night vision goggles on, I've got my rifle, and my dog's walking out in front of me, and the Navy SEAL team behind me, and there's stars, and it's beautiful. And like, I kind of take a little moment, and I'm like, I'm in a foreign land with a dog and a Navy SEAL team behind me. Like, 12-year-old me would be so freaking impressed and pumped right now. Like, I'm never going to be this cool again. And it was a very, very cool experience. It's something that not a lot of people get to experience. And I'm thankful that I got it. But it really kind of, it affected me. It made me see some things that maybe I wouldn't have seen in myself otherwise. Some of which I wasn't very proud of, some of which I had to deal with later on in life. And it led me to where I am now. It led me to seeking help and seeking therapy and getting some help from that. Didn't necessarily stem from that, but maybe would not have come up if I hadn't had that experience.
Right. I always say that a lot of the things that we experience in the military that continues to come up is really just a lot of times something that happened in childhood that's sort of replaying itself.
Sure. Yep.
But in a little bit of a different narrative. But it's kind of like you can weave that string to say, okay, there was something that sort of happened when I was younger, and I'm sort of still playing out that dynamic in some way with different in a different situation. And the thing is about going into a place like Iraq, or anytime I think we get deployed in some of these places and we see the way other people live, what they value. It's so different than what Americans sometimes value and the way they live.
Yes, absolutely. And seeing that, I think seeing that different perspective and seeing, like you said it beautifully. I mean, just seeing how different people live. It really gives you a different perspective on life and on how we choose to live.
Right. And I think that's one of the joys of serving, and sometimes some of the most stressful parts of serving is because you see certain things and you're like, I just can't believe they would do that, or I cannot believe that they're so grateful and have so much less than we do.
Right.
But are like, I saw that in the Philippines, but are so much happier and so much more bonded with their families and things like that. What was the reaction of the people when you would walk through with your working dog? Like,
so the majority were terrified. The majority were terrified of dogs. Right.
Like a pet.
Right. They knew that they were attack dogs. We also all had beards, and they knew that, the men with beards did the dirty thing, not dirty things. Yeah, we didn't do anything illegal by any means. I don't want to imply that. But yeah, they saw the dog, and I had a $5,000 bounty on my head, and Kitti had a $10,000 bounty on her head during the time. So they knew that we were there finding the things that they were trying to use to harm us. And so that was, we were always kind of a target. A good buddy of mine was with the Army Special Forces around the exact same time. And we would talk periodically, and he would always tell me, he's like, yeah, I'm always the first one shot at. I don't see getting out of here.
Right.
And there was a point where, numerous points where I had no thought that I was going to make it home.
Right.
Like wrote the letter to my kids and stuff like that. And it's just like, no, there's no way I'm getting out of here. There's no way that's happening. Fate is a real thing. And I'm lucky. I still to this day feel very lucky to experience all of the things that I'm getting to experience now. Watching my daughters grow is something I didn't ever think I would get to do. And as these pains of getting older happen, these physical pains, they're a blessing. Not everybody gets to grow old.
No, they don't. And I mean, there's a whole generation, the GWAT veteran generation that is in that same stage of life that I think you and I are in now. And it's tough because there's a lot of things you have to kind of reconcile and deal with, because there just wasn't those conversations like they are today, especially surrounding mental health. Especially
considering around mental health. Yeah, it took me a long time to actually seek out help. And when I did, the people around me were supportive, but prior to, there was fear. There was fear in seeking out help. There was fear in being seen as weak and feeling weak and being seen as a liability. And so I think, and I hope that mindset has shifted majorly in our society and in our warriors and our military. And I hope it has, because it's extremely important. There's a lot of prep work for anyone who has not been deployed. You prepare for months and months and months. You go on the deployment, and then you're home. And so your mind, your body can't really catch up to, hey, buddy, you're safe. Right. And so what do we do as military members? We cope with alcohol. Yeah. And we drank a lot, and we had a lot of fun. But we were looking back on it now, as an adult, you can see like, oh, we weren't just having fun. We were coping, and we were using each other, and we were using alcohol to cope with what we weren't ready to deal with at the time.
Yeah. And I think that there just needs to be more conversations and more awareness surrounding that. And I think that it's hard too, because now you've got this whole generation who's older that have been through war and have seen the impacts of trauma from war zones. But then you have this whole entire younger generation that just hasn't seen that. Now we're in a period where people aren't experiencing that. So I think there's just going to be this sort of cyclic shift where hopefully we won't have to repeat all the same lessons.
I hope so. Yeah.
that happened before, because this new generation hasn't been exposed to it yet. So I think that's partially my concern. My second concern is I spoke with a guest last night who's a Navy SEAL, and we talked about plant-based medicine. And there's so much out there that we know about that is working
Yes.
for GWAT veterans, and to include psychedelics, but there
Yes.
hasn't really been a push on the clinical side to really explore those options, because unfortunately there's not a price tag that can go along with it versus a pharmaceutical. So I think it'll be interesting going forward to see what types of therapies, not just plant-based, but like what I had, EMDR, wellness, meditation, those kinds of things. And to try to get as much as we can, not always, as maybe a little bit away from the pharmaceuticals, because as we know, there's a lot of side effects that come with that. So that's, I think, my hope going forward with some of these things.
Same. And I did a lot of research on, and I could, if you don't mind, I jump ahead to law school for a little bit.
Yeah.
I was in law school from 2017 to 2020, and during 2 of my summers, I spent 2 of my summers on Capitol Hill and working on Capitol Hill. And one of the ones that one of the things I really started to focus on, excuse me, was how marijuana impacted individuals with post-traumatic stress. And so actually, let me back up a little bit. I didn't start there. I started with, how do I get off of all these medications? What is the other option? And I kept, all of the research I was doing kept leading back to marijuana, and psychedelics and the homeopathic yoga and meditation and all that stuff. So I ended up starting experimenting and doing some research, and got really heavily involved with medical marijuana. And the whole field it's growing. We're moving towards that direction. We're moving, I believe, hopefully in the right direction. Marijuana helped me smile again.
Yeah.
Marijuana helped me sleep again.
Wow.
I was sleeping about 1 to 3 hours a night, every night for years, and having panic attacks in the middle of the night and being afraid to sleep. And marijuana allowed me to be able to sleep. And it allowed me to smile again. I would smoke after the girls went to bed, and I would just put on a funny movie, and I started laughing. And I hadn't been able to do that in years.
Right.
And so it's a shame that there's still that stereotype on it. And I think as more and more research comes out, it's going to continue to improve. Or it's going to become more of an option for individuals that can benefit from it. And what I would recommend is I don't want to come across as a complete advocate for the psychedelics or for marijuana, because it's not great for everyone. What I want to be an advocate for is find out what you need for your healing, whether you're a combat veteran or not. Everyone struggles. Everyone has trauma. Everyone has something to deal with. Find out what you need in order to be successful. And that was a really, really major turning point in my life when I was sitting in a doctor's office in Hammond, Louisiana. And I told my doctor, like, hey, I had to go cold turkey on this medications. Like, I was worried I was going to kill myself. And I remember it vividly. Sat back. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. That's a really bad side effect of some of those medications you're on. And that's kind of what I did. I was like, wait a minute, like a side effect?
Yeah.
Like, I'm seeing you for depression. He's like, I get it.
Right.
And it kind of hit me right at that moment. That was a very pivotal moment in my life. I'm like, oh, so you're telling me if I want to feel better, I have to figure this out. Like, I have to make myself feel better. Yeah. I can't rely on a doctor. I can't rely on the VA. I can't rely on medication. I have to figure this out. And so I started researching, and I started using my law school education as a way to research. And so again, if you're struggling, I wouldn't just say, oh, go get some marijuana and go watch a movie. Do some research, do some soul searching, figure out what it is that you need in order to get to the place that you want to be.
Yeah. And I think that applies for all of you. That applies to like everything that we take on, because what will work for one person in their healing journey isn't necessarily what's going to work for someone else. And I think it's important just to try different healing modalities. I benefit a lot from support groups. Put my husband in a support group, that just wouldn't happen.
Yep, nope.
He'll go play pickleball, or he'll play volleyball, but you're not going to find him in any talk therapy group.
No, he doesn't seem like he would care for that at all.
Not at all. So, but I personally love those places because I always make friends and they're fun, and that's really how I started my healing journey, was going to some of the anonymous groups in San Diego. And that was when it was the first time I ever heard people being vulnerable. Like, I had no idea that like alpha male kind of people that I would be attracted to will actually talk about their feelings, because the only kind of men that I would allow myself to be around, because I had trauma, were just these very unhealthy and commitment phobic people. And then I started getting around these other people, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, there's a whole nother caliber of person that I could relate with, and that's got me on the path to
and that's
meeting my husband.
huge. That's very huge. I mean,
It was a
JFK
huge
said it.
breakthrough.
You're only as, I think it was JFK. You're only as good as those you surround yourself with. And so if you are struggling, it's tough to look at your circle as well as yourself. But sometimes you really need to look at your circle and see if you're surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you be whatever it is that you're wanting to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that was a huge game changer, going there and getting that kind of help. And it just kind of gradually, like I said, led me down the path where I am today, where I'm, very content and very happy.
Good.
So, yeah, so that's definitely something that I think we have to do. So tell me, you leave 2006, you leave Iraq. How much longer do you stay in the Air Force?
I did. So after Afghanistan, which was 2012,
Yeah,
I did one more deployment to Jordan in 2015. Went with my dog Copy. We searched vehicles coming in and out. We're there for about 6 months. It was there was some rough stuff going on, but not that bad. That was when I had my first panic attack. And so I came home from that in 2015, and I knew I just knew something wasn't right. I could feel it. Something was off. My body was hurting from all of the little injuries that accumulated over time.
Yeah.
And my mind was hurt. And so, there was an incident on base. I had what I had a panic attack at a base function, and just kind of froze and lost it. And that was the point where I was like, okay, I have got to get some help. And so the good friend of mine that was in Afghanistan the same time I was, he helped convince me to go spend some time at a mental health facility in Florida. I went to Emerald Coast Mental Health Facility in Florida, Crestview, Florida. And it was supposed to be there for 30 days, ended up being there for 40 days, and really kind of got myself right. And that was in July, and I got out in September of that year. Got out in September of 2016. And I spent about a year kind of bouncing around to different retreats and stuff like that. I found yoga and meditation to be relatively helpful, although it took me a long time to really get into it. It took me a lot of years to really get into it. But I got out knowing that I was going to go to law school. I got out in September of 16, and then got accepted into LSU in January and started in August.
Okay. Did you know what kind of lawyer you wanted to be?
I had never even met a lawyer. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Why did you want to
go into law?
So that, looking back, I think it was because it was the most challenging thing I could think of.
Yeah.
Honestly. I knew it was a great education. And so law school was really instrumental for me. It was 3 years of my life, but there was a lot that went on. It taught me a whole lot about myself. I was very much suffering from the imposter syndrome. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where you just think you're good enough for anything,
right,
or you think it's somebody else, not you. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So when I first started considering law school, I literally laughed. I was like, I'm not smart enough for that. Like, there's no way. And so I started looking into it and realized, like, okay, if I want to do something, I can do it. Yeah. That is, I'm just not going to take no for an answer.
Right.
And so I started studying for the LSAT and ended up doing fairly well on it, and got accepted into LSU, and ended up finishing in the top third of my class.
Wow.
So I went from thinking I wasn't smart enough to having a very well respected position in my class, and leaving there knowing, like, yeah, you can literally do anything you want to do. If you have the courage to step out and try something new, and the willpower not to quit, there's literally nothing that you can't do. As far as your question, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I always kind of saw myself leaning towards a position in politics, whether that's a U.S. representative or anything. I did see myself doing something like that, and really got an education when I was on Capitol Hill and changed my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I've been around some of the DC people. I went to the Higseth confirmation hearings, and it was definitely a different experience. I mean, I have mixed feelings about DC. I was watching a show last night with, Sean Ryan was on Tucker Carlson, and he's just like, I hate DC. I avoid it, and I say the same thing. I avoid it like the plague. But then there's that other side to me that's like, well, you can't bitch about the fact that all this stuff is broke if you're not willing to be a person that's at the place where these things are happening and trying to do your part to make change. So I see it both ways, but it's a pretty tough place.
I absolutely adore DC. I love it. It's one of my favorite places ever. But as far as being in that world, as far as being in that, being a decision maker, being a policy maker, working in that, to me, what I saw, what I gathered from a policy standpoint, you're going to get some victories and it's going to be fantastic, but you're also going to deal with a lot of losses.
Right.
And victory and loss isn't the right way to look at it. I don't really think that's the easiest way to describe it.
I mean, it reminds me of like even serving in the military. A lot of times your day to day, especially as a staff PAO, is not glamorous whatsoever. You're spending your entire day in meetings, pushing, talking points or messaging up and down the chain, or you're preparing someone to go on camera. You're doing research. You're not necessarily doing this big, like, oh, you're going to this great commission and it's this super exciting thing. And oh my gosh, look, it's Fleet Week, New York. No, it's not like that day to day. And I look at Congress the same way. It's just this your big machine of bureaucracy.
Yes. And unfortunately, the one with the money wins.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. And I don't really want to go too much into it. Sorry. But yeah, it was a beautiful experience working on Capitol Hill, but it was also a little unfortunate. I think from my perspective, working in the military for 10 years, getting a law degree, and then working on Capitol Hill for 2 years, it's almost like looking behind the curtain, like watching hot dogs being made.
And then
it's like
seeing what really goes on.
No, I'm not. And that's ultimately what it came down to is after my 3 years, I realized like, there's no way I can do this job and be happy.
Yeah.
I had 2 job offers. And I just turned one, and one of them was doing something that I would have really, really enjoyed. It was it was advocating for military and veterans in a way that I would have really enjoyed it. And I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I told the people that offered me the job, like, look, I'm just going to take a step back. I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
Sure.
I just know that this isn't the right way. My dad thought I was an idiot. He did. My dad and my good friend, Jamie Ragland, who is in the Secret Service now. And then the one of the individuals that offered me a job, they're like, you're an idiot. But I just knew it wasn't right. There was something that I felt that I just knew that wasn't, and I'm not saying that I may not go back into it later.
Right.
But at the time, it just wasn't for me. And I realized why. That was in May. I graduated in May of 2020. And in November of 2020, a very good family friend, mentor, family member passed away and left. He was my trainer in the Air Force, actually. So when I was in Moody Air Force Base for those 5 years, he was my trainer and kennel master. And we were very good friends. He ended up actually marrying my then wife's first cousin.
Okay.
And so we were family. We had a falling out and we didn't really speak very much, but he passed away and left a dog training business, his widow and 2 kids. And so I stepped in and I told his widow, like, look, I'm here. Like, if you need me to be here so you can deal with whatever it is you're dealing with, all of the things you're dealing with, like, I'm here. And so we came to an agreement and I started working there in November of 2020 while she dealt with the new life that she had to deal with. And I spent 2 years there and managed it until she got enough help to where she could continue it on her own with some help. And she's still doing really great and still working. And so I was able to step away and come back home to Long Beach, which is when I opened up my business.
So was it that experience, those 2 years working there, that made you decide to take such a radical turn?
So yeah, when I got out of law school, I was kind of lost. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that lawyering wasn't for me at the time.
Yeah.
I was very newly single or divorced. And so I was really kind of just like, all right, God, what am I doing? What do you want? And unfortunately that was the answer was was MCA. And so when I got back in there and I started working and I started seeing what Ted had built and what it was that I was doing, I was like, oh,
that's so cool.
This is why I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because if I would have accepted any of those jobs, I would have been making enough money that it would have been very tough to walk away from.
Yes.
I would have been making a ton of money, but I would have had to really, really, really consider leaving. And I don't know if I would have.
It's like fate stepped in.
Absolutely. It absolutely did. And that's what I felt. And that gave me, so working there, we usually had 20 to 30 dogs a day. And we would do training and doggy daycare. And it gave me an opportunity to find reasons to smile.
And it exposed you to the business side of dog training, which is, I would think, is so difficult. Just because you were a military working dog handler, that just told me, okay, you can work with dogs.
It's so
but the
different.
business side,
yes,
and opening up doing all the administrative paperwork of running a business, then doing the marketing of running a business, then trying to find the clients, all those things that you didn't have to deal with as a military working dog trainer. You were just working with the dogs. So now you got exposure. It was a win-win. You helped your friend's widow. And then at the same time, it gave you sort of this almost like an internship.
Yes, absolutely.
Into this world.
And what's funny, so when I left the Air Force, we had to go through transition assistance program.
Sure.
Right. And it was 3 days and they sat everybody down and they were like, well, what are you going to do? What did you do in the military? How are you going to transfer that over?
We all know that.
And I said, I was a dog handler. I'm going to law school. And they were like, well, why don't you just train dogs? And I laughed. I was like, no one's going to pay you to train dogs.
I know. Nobody understands.
I found
that
it
it's
so
a business.
silly that they would even ask, like, no one's going to pay me to do that.
Right.
I was dead wrong. But I am glad that I went the route I went, because the law degree, one, it gave me the confidence that we talked about. I know thanks to that I can do anything that I set my mind to.
And if something were to happen, not to be afraid of lawfare, because I will tell you, I joke with people, but I'm not joking. I do believe that lawfare is the biggest threat, especially to somebody like myself, who some people, I'm not a whistleblower. I'm a person who features whistleblowers, but I'm a person who's not afraid to speak up. And it's the biggest thing that I feel that we feel threatened by. But the fact that you have that background, I mean, even if you don't represent yourself in something, you know exactly what kind of services that a lawyer is capable of doing. And you don't know every facet of the law, but you know enough to ask the right questions.
And it also helped reshape my brain. Right. Every level of education you get, whether it's formal education or hands-on or any type of education, it restructures your brain. And so I think that not only did law school give me a challenge that I needed at the time that I needed it, but it also helped me frame my brain a little bit better, to where now that I'm working with dogs, I understand the English language a little bit better. I understand how to teach, how to talk to people. So one of the hardest parts of my job right now isn't necessarily teaching the dogs. It's teaching the people. It's convincing the humans, they're humans, to do what I'm asking them to do. So that legal education really taught me the pliability of language. Right. You can give a sheet of paper to 10 lawyers and say, interpret this, and you're going to get 10 different interpretations, and all of them are factual and all of them are true.
Absolutely.
But it's their interpretation. And so what that taught me is it's not necessarily what you say, it's how it's perceived.
Right.
And so that has really helped me as a dog trainer to be able to make sure that my message is being perceived the proper way.
Absolutely. And I think that as a lawyer, you have to learn, and maybe you don't do it in your filings or your motions, as I've read my colleague friend, podcast guest, Andy Lindstrom. I just had him on my show, and he's in the process of doing many, many hearings and filings and motions. And I read this stuff and I'm like, how in the world can anyone understand what the heck
it's
this
a different
is saying?
Language. It really is a different language. The first semester, the first year of law school is brutal. It's brutal because you're taught in the Socratic method, which means the professor's up there and they'll give you a way too much to read for every class, way too much that you just don't have the opportunity to read, and you don't understand it
and
anyway.
You have to pick and choose. And
then they sit there and basically make fun of you for not knowing it, and it's stressful, and it's meant to be that way. And it's stressful. It's literally like going into a foreign language class and then berating you until you figure it out. and then it's also very competitive as well. And so there's a lot of people don't know this. There's one 4.0 in each class. That's it. And there's only so many 3.8s and 3.7s and 3.6s and 3.5s. And so not only do you have to know the information, you have to know it better than all of those other smart individuals in that room if you want a good grade.
That's insane. That is insane. So you decide after the couple years of helping your friend's widow run the dog training business that you go back, you move to Long Beach and you say, I'm going to start this. How do you get started?
So it took me I worked on my plan for about 6 months. I just sat with pen and paper each night. And I would write down my vision. What did I want? What did I want to do? How did I want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I had this idea of training dogs out of my home, and just training them throughout the natural progression of my day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up looking for a home. I found one in Long Beach, Mississippi. I had somebody help me build a website, build a Facebook page, build all my social media aspects, and get me set up on Google. And you have to do some work to be able to be searchable on Google. You have to do some work, and you have to get people to give you recommendations and Google reviews and things like that. And so I spent about 6 months learning how to do all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I did is, before I moved to Long Beach, I moved to Long Beach in September, I think 3 years ago. I don't know what year it was, but in September. And so in July, I started advertising my services.
Mm-hmm.
So July, August, I was paying for Google advertising and Facebook advertising. And so when I moved into my house on September 1st, I had a dog on September 5th. I had 2 dogs actually on September 5th.
Wow, it was that quick.
It was that quick, right? So I think the advertising ahead of time was brilliant on my part, because again, I stepped in to a house with dogs waiting on me, and really have been running nonstop since then.
Wow. So that's a great story. Do you have anybody who helps you?
So my business grew so quickly that I started to expand. I ended up having like a 6-month wait list, and I was only taking 3 dogs at a time, 4 dogs at a time, which was a lot more than I expected.
Right.
And so I hired somebody to answer my phones and do all my book work. I hired like basically a kennel tech to be there when I wasn't there and to help me out. And then I hired somebody for the weekend. So I had 4 employees, and then I also had a friend of mine that was helping me train. So I had 4 or 5 employees, and we were rocking and rolling, and things were going good. And then I just realized, like, this is not what I wanted.
No, this
is not what I created. This is not what I wanted to do. This isn't how I wanted to run my life.
Right.
This isn't.
Plus at your house, it's like all the time.
And it's my house, right? So I didn't have any peace anywhere.
Any separation.
Right. And so I ended up having a conversation with all of those individuals, and ended up just telling them, like, look, you're doing great, but this just isn't my dream. And so I let them go. And that was in September of last year. And so now it's just me. I have 2 dogs at the house. My brother's living with me right now, and he helps out a ton. And then I also have, I started Skillbridge, not only for the position you're going to be doing, but also for dog trainers. So I have a Air Force medic coming in. I won't say her name just in case she doesn't want to know, but,
sure.
But I have an Air Force medic coming in next Tuesday, and she's going to be following me around and helping me out and learning how to train dogs.
That's awesome.
And hopefully finding a career in dog training when she leaves. So I'll have her for about 5 months. I'm sure you'll meet her.
I'm excited. I am so excited. And one of the things that we'll talk about offline is, how you're going to want to do sort of your social media at this point, because there's so many different ways to tell the story of what you're doing. You can do it by me going out and getting some, close in shots of the people who have benefited from this service, and me just going over there and talking to them. You can have people obviously write testimonials, and then just do some, poll images and do blogs. In that way, you can do demonstrations.
There's a ton
There's
of
so much
opportunities. There's a ton
to tell this story. So it's really exciting. And I think that dog training is one of the most underestimated parts of being a responsible pet owner.
Yes, I think so. I think I was going to jump in right when we started about this. I think we are smack dab in the middle of a major mindset shift on dogs and on animals. I think we are moving from the idea of dogs as pets to the idea of dogs as our companions. And that goes from a relationship of ownership versus a relationship of love and trust and guidance. And that's kind of what I'm trying to use my platform for, is to help people understand, like, look, I'm telling you right now, these dogs understand and experience way more than we give them credit for. far more.
Right. They feel
They're
things.
they
They
are
feel
energetic
the
creatures.
tension in the home. They feel
Mhm.
if you're off, they're off. If you're on, they're on.
Everything flows
They
down
know their
leash.
schedule down to like, oh, if I don't feed Jada at this exact time, she starts bugging me.
They
Like,
are
she doesn't wanna
very,
watch.
very good
Like, how
at
does she
training
know
us.
that?
Dogs are one of the only creatures on earth that will love you more than they love themselves.
Yeah.
But they're also very good at training us. They've been
Mhm.
evolving next to us for
Right. It's in
15,
their
20,000
DNA.
years, right?
Mhm.
And so their psychology is fairly parallel to ours. They're not the same, right?
Mhm.
But they do. You said it. I mean, if I have a dog that comes into my house and it's very, very anxious, one of two or three things have happened. It's had some trauma in its past, because they do hold on to trauma, or they live with an anxious human being.
Yep, and they're reflecting the personality of their human.
Yes.
And if you don't fix the human and her or his anxiety, you will continue. It doesn't matter how much training you put into the dog, because the dog's still going to feed off of that fear.
Now, here's the cool thing about what I do, though, and I can't believe I'm giving away this secret, but dogs can be an excuse to feel better. Right.
Mhm.
I'm an example of that. I am only alive because of dogs. But dogs can be that excuse. Change is difficult. People don't like to change.
No.
And even when we know that it's important, and even when we know we need to change, it's very difficult to do that.
Absolutely.
But if we can say, I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for my dog, I'm doing this for Jada, it's a little bit easier. And you don't really necessarily need to go out and like, oh, I'm going to be less stressful for you. No, go take a walk.
Mhm.
Go take your dog in the woods and go for a walk, and be there with your dog. Be intentful with that
Yep.
time. Be purposeful with that time. And your anxiety is going to fall away naturally.
I agree. There have been times even around here where I've just felt like, oh, I need to get out of the house, because I'm an anxious person. My husband is not an anxious person. And I'll go out with her and I'll come back and I'll just be like, oh, everything's fine.
Mhm.
You know, or Jada and I have a tradition in the morning. She loves to climb on my lap, but she's very good about knowing when I'm ready to have her on my lap. And so I just know in my mind, I'm like, okay, I got to just, put the computer aside, just use the phone, read off the Kindle or something. And this is my time, because it's my time to be with her. I'm also the one who feeds Jada, because Jada, my husband's much more rough and tumble. And so she likes that. And he's just more nurturing. He's
Mhm.
much more nurturing than I am. And so she gravitates towards him. So he intentionally made it so that I would be the one to feed her, so that, Jada will have sort of that natural attachment to me as well. So I feed her breakfast and her dinner every day.
Very good.
So we have like, routines with Jada that I think help us create that bond.
And that's another thing. Dogs are habits of creatures of habit. Excuse me.
Mhm.
And so they need that structure. They
Yeah,
need that.
they like it.
They do. They operate so much easier. And so again, if you're struggling, just setting up some amount of structure for your day and doing it for your dog can really go a long way.
Absolutely. And if you walk your dog at a certain time every day, or you take
Mhm.
your dog out for a run, it's getting you exercise, it's getting the dog exercise. It's such a win-win.
Absolutely.
One of the things I've always been curious about with dog trainers is, how do you work with somebody? Because when someone's wanting to hire a dog trainer, sometimes they want to spend the money, but they don't necessarily want to invest the time.
Absolutely.
And so how do you use your lawyer persuasion skills and your leadership to show them how it's really in it for them
Mhm.
to actually do the work that you're guiding them to do?
It's different with every person,
Mhm.
to be honest. I'm a very subjective trainer as opposed to objective.
Right.
And I give each dog that comes in what that dog needs.
Mhm.
And when I'm with their humans and we're spending those 2 hours talking, it really is on me again to be able to give the message in a way that they can accept it and can say, okay, I see what you're saying here.
Right.
And yes, I see that I have to put the time in. Now on the front end of that, on the front side, I make sure and tell them all the time, look, this is not a car. I'm not going in and tuning things
And
up,
they just do it all.
slamming the
Yeah.
hood, and then telling you you're good for 60,000 miles. It doesn't happen that way. You have a very active role in this. Dogs learn through association. They have an associative nature of how they learn.
For sure.
And so they associate you, owner, with all of the behaviors that they have right now. And so if they can spend 2 years with me,
Mhm.
but if they come back to you and you
You
have
do
the
all the
same
same
behaviors, the dog's going to act the exact same way with you.
Right.
And so my job is to get that message across and try to tell them, like, look, don't waste your money.
Yeah.
I'm not cheap. don't waste your money if you're not willing to do this work,
Sure.
because it's not going to work.
No, it's not.
And I have refresher programs. I'd be happy to take your money again, and your dog can come see me again. And that does happen from time to time, because life gets busy.
Yeah.
Life is busy, and
Mhm.
change is not easy.
Right.
And so that does happen, and that's okay. Training should be continuous. And if life happens and you just slack and you fall down, then that's okay. And I'm there, and I can be there to help. Or
Right.
I also offer just phone calls and say, hey, what are you doing? Try this instead.
Right.
But it really is one of those things that I do the best I can and try to get that message to be perceived. But if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it.
Yeah. At the end of the day,
it's their relationship. Yes. And that's kind of what I try to stress most is, look, this is a relationship in a very similar way that you have a relationship with your children. This is a relationship that you're in charge of. And you don't have to be the alpha. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to yell. You don't have to do anything. Just communicate.
Right.
Communicate with your dog in a consistent manner. It doesn't matter what you tell your dog to do. If you're consistent with a word and expect the same action every time, and you reward them for it, why wouldn't they do it?
Right. Well, we had such a good experience with our dog trainer in Norfolk when we were training Jada to be a psychiatric service dog. And all we had was one session. That was all my husband needed, because he just wanted to see what she was doing, because she just had so much anxiety. And so we had to figure out a way to expose her, because she was going to fly on an airplane all the way to London. And so she had to be going through all these different steps. And really, it really came down to not feeding into her anxiety.
Yes, absolutely.
Not feed-
So that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Two things on that. One, first, we are inadvertently encouraging bad behaviors. We, as most humans, when we see a creature suffering, especially our dog, right? What do we want to do? We want to make them feel better. We want to comfort them. We want to soothe them. So a dog walks up and they're feeling anxious. What's the first thing we do? Oh, baby, it's okay. You're fine.
Put our arms around them and all these things.
And you're rewarding that behavior.
Right.
And so you can train, and we train unhealthy mindsets. We train into them anxiety, right? Another side of that, the number 2 part, dogs are not set up for success in this society, period.
I know.
They are suffering from anxiety far more than we give them credit for. If your dog is reactive, barking at other people, if they are uncontrollably barking, when you get down far enough, it's either a lack of exposure or fear, which is fear, right? Even a lack of exposure, it leads to fear. Our dogs are experiencing a lot of fear. Think about what dogs are bred to do. Any breed is minus the little bitty ones that are just bred to be cute. They're bred to run. They're bred to roam. They're bred to scavenge, right? They're scavengers. They're problem solvers.
Exposure to sounds and lights, and
right. And
all
they need all of this novel thing. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs applies very easily to dogs. They need to run. They need to be mentally challenged.
Right.
They need to go out and explore their area, right? They need pack walks. A dog that is stuck in an apartment, and I say stuck, if you're living in an apartment and you want a dog, get a dog.
Yeah, but you got to take that dog out for a walk.
But you have to give that dog, you have to satisfy some of their needs, their basic instinctive needs, or else that dog just isn't going to care what you want.
No.
They're just not. Because, imagine a 6-year-old child who isn't getting enough food. Or who isn't getting loved on, and you want them to do better at their homework. They don't care about that homework. They don't care.
I can see it even just in the difference with my husband is just much more caring and involved and just more active. And Jada's of course more attached to him. Like I don't begrudge that, because I know that I love Jada. I love having my time with her, but I also know that I don't give as much to her as he does. And so she's naturally going to have that kind of bond with him. And I think she also looks up to him as more of a pack leader. And so she gravitates towards that. But I absolutely agree with you. I think you had mentioned that in one of your, we'll talk about your podcast, Whiskey and Wolves podcast. you talked about the fact that like we don't stop to think, does your dog want to be with you? Are you the person that your dog wants to hang around? It's not, if you aren't positioning yourself to be that person, don't get upset if the dog doesn't react to you and doesn't listen to you or doesn't want to interact, because you have to build that relationship.
And that's kind of the way my entire program is built, is I want these dogs to want to do what I'm asking them to do, because they know that I'm going to give them every single thing that they need. And then I just have to transfer that over to the human. But you're right. I have a couple clients in mind, actually. They're like, yeah, he never comes when I call him. Why would he?
Yeah, that's what you're talking about in the show. Yeah. So let's transition to that. So not only have you built a business, not only do you do this in such a way that is manageable and scalable for what it is you want now for yourself, you've now transitioned to not just providing advice for your clients, but to providing advice in more of a podcast format. So tell the audience a little bit about that.
The podcast is my favorite thing I'm doing right now. I love it. It's called Whiskey and Wolves. It's on all of the platforms.
And I have a link to it in the show notes.
A very good friend of mine, Evan Stewart, owns K-Pro K9. He's really my only competition around here. It's funny. They're our only competition, but we've become very close friends over the last year and a half or so. And so we, one of Evan's favorite things that he says, I really, really respect this man. And one of his favorite things that he says is, I want to do as much good as I can for as many people as I can for as long as I can. And that's kind of what we go into that podcast thinking. And for me, it's perfect. It's at his house. He did all the setup. He usually comes up with the topics. His wife, Heather, does all of the audio and all of the recordings, and everything's taken care of. So I just show up, I drink, and I talk. It's amazing. It's like my favorite thing ever. But it's a very cool platform because, again, I think there are some issues in the dog. There's a lot of issues in the dog community, to be honest. And we have so many issues on a human level that sometimes it's easy to forget that these dogs are spending time in a shelter, no matter how friendly these shelter employees are. These dogs are leaving there with trauma.
Of course.
They do not belong. It's tough to say that dogs don't belong in cages, but the atmosphere in a shelter environment is not conducive to growing a healthy dog. No. Plain and simple.
And that's the thing that I always say to people. It's like, I want everyone to adopt, don't shop. And I don't believe in puppy mills. I don't believe in getting a dog at a pet store that you haven't seen how the dog was raised and bred and haven't seen the conditions. But at the same time, I do understand why people want puppies.
Yes,
I do.
I get it. My friends have stopped asking me what type of dog to get. You go to the pound. Yeah. Go to the animal shelter. Right. That's the type of dog you get. But to each their own. It is an important decision, and those dogs are coming out with more needs. Yeah. Plain and simple. The dogs do hold on to trauma, and they do need some assistance getting over that in a very similar way that humans do. Right. One of my favorite ways to train, one of my favorite things to train, because not every dog comes in with the same problems. One of my favorite things to train is fear, because it basically what I get to do is I get to reintroduce them to the world in a way that they find safe. And by the end of their time with me, I usually ask for 3 weeks when a dog's dealing with fear, they have just such a much better quality of life, right? You can see them going from that darty, just what's going on? What's next? What's next? To just experiencing a walk. And it's beautiful. There are some dogs that it takes a little longer. Right. Sure. There are some dogs that just need more time, but they're worth it. They deserve it. And so I only take 2 to 3 dogs at a time. The number of dogs that I can help are limited. And so if doing Whiskey and Wolves, if that helps someone and helps get my message, not necessarily that it's my message that I want to get across, but if we are able to get that message out to more people, and I get to drink a bunch of whiskey and hang out with my friend. Yeah.
Nice studio setting, and you don't have to do any of the pre-production or the post-production.
Yeah, I love it. It's like it was made for me. No, it's perfect.
No, I love it. Well, Chris,
Is there anything else that we haven't discussed or haven't gone over with adoptable dog? Tell us a little bit about that.
So the adoptable dog, we started about 1.5 years or so ago, and we kind of took a little break. We've had to take a break just because we've had a whole lot going on personally, work-wise, all the things. But I'm really excited for when that can get back up and running. It's a fantastic 501c3. The main idea is to raise money to be able to afford people like me, not just me, but trainers hopefully around the nation, to be able to offer training for those dogs that we were just talking about, the dogs in the shelter that just need a little bit of help before they can fit into a family environment. Because what happens is it's almost like the recidivism rate of prisoners is somebody they'll get home, they'll be way too much for mom or dad to handle, and there's like, look, we have to bring this dog back. And so if we had an opportunity, if the idea is to have an adoptable dog presence in multiple facilities. And then I'm working with different dog trainers. It's not a canine coaching with Chris thing. It's separate. But working with different local trainers and saying, hey, we have this much money. We can offer you, $50 a lesson or 60 or whatever the number is. Would you be willing to go put your card up there, and when the shelter individual representative calls you, will you work on behalf of the adoptable dog, and we will pay you? The reception we've had has been beautiful. We just need enough people and time to kind of keep it
going. Moving. I think it's an amazing idea, because there are so many dogs that, with the right amount of care and the right amount of training, they are suitable for a home.
Yes.
But if you can just put that little extra time.
There are very, very few dogs out there that are beyond repair. There are very few dogs. There are some out there, but with the proper time, with the proper training, you can get a dog to feel a whole lot better and to fit into your home. It just takes time, takes a lot of patience, and it takes love.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to working with you here in a couple weeks.
It's gonna be exciting.
And this is a really great opportunity to do a in-studio podcast. You see, I'm a little bit different, a little bit further out. My husband, your microphone is acting weird. Yes, so definitely it's going to get some bugs out as we go to build this studio and keep building the home out a little bit more. But as I always say, to close out these calls, thank you all for joining me tonight. Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'll get to the comments later. I didn't have a chance to kind of read those all the way from over here. You see, I'm a little bit further back, but take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and bye-bye now.